So if you've ever wondered about Mobile and what it's been like for the last 40 plus years, we have a special guest today who's going to peel back the curtain and let us know some inside secrets about the media, whether it was print, whether it was news, whether it was video, all of those things combined. We're going to learn some deep secrets about the city of Mobile and some things I've been wanting to know for a very long time.
G100 FM plays more of your favorite songs.
We're Del Shams,
Where the proof is in the pricing.
Super Savings Store.
Hoffman Furniture will approve your credit.
You're listening to
I want to know where to go.
the Living in Mobile, Alabama podcast, where we talk about all things Mobile.
Greer's got it, we guarantee it.
Now, here's your host, Jeff Jones.
40888, so don't be late.
So I'm super excited today. We've got the very first episode of the Living in Mobile podcast. And for anybody who knows me, they know that I have been working on this for over a year. And finally, it has happened today. So we're thankful for that. And for the very first guest, I thought long and hard about this. Who could we have that would be really all-encompassing of the things that we wanted to start with? No pressure there. But who could we start with that would really give us a big overview of living in Mobile, which is what this is about? It's not about anything specific, but a very broad scope of the city of Mobile, answering a lot of questions, going into a lot of detail. So today, we've got a very special guest, Mr. Ron Reams, and thankful to have him on board. And so if you've lived in Mobile, well, I figured, anybody who's lived in Mobile for a while, they know that name. Mm-hmm. In fact, often it's more presented in a professional studio way. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ron Reams.
No, not quite that. Not quite that authoritative, but close.
Well, Ron, you sent over a bio, and it kind of talked about some of the things you've been involved with. And really, you've been involved in a lot of things in Mobile. But in your own words, why don't you give us a little summary of what that looks like if somebody met you for the very first time and they're an out-of-towner and they don't know anything about Mobile, but they'd heard this name, Ron Reams. What would be a good summary of that?
Well, to begin with, I arrived here in 1977. I'm a native of Atlanta. I started my broadcasting career about 19, 20 years old. And I was in the Atlanta area part-time, and then I started going full-time looking for work. And I worked in several cities or towns that weren't quite cities in Georgia before I moved to Alabama. One of the first jobs I had in Alabama was Phoenix City. And I learned the history of Phoenix City and had no idea what the history of Phoenix City was as far as the corruption and everything that was part of their history. But then I moved back over to Columbus, Georgia. I was there for a couple of years. I got into television. I did the Today Show breakaways when there's 7:25 and 8:25.
Okay.
And I was the guy doing the news in the morning because I didn't have enough staff to come in and do it as a regular news person. So they would leave me scripts like the night before, and I would get in front of the camera. At the same time, I was the station's engineer, which means I turned on the transmitter in the morning and I made sure the air was circulating around the transmitter so it wouldn't melt.
Unlike in this room where the air is not circulating.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Caleb, we've got our engineer over here, Caleb. Hey, if you get super hot and you want to take a venture through the house and turn down the AC, feel free to do that. We've got one down there.
Permission.
Yes, and one down there. But go ahead.
But anyway, I was there for a while, and I was in my native Georgia. And that job played out for some reason. In other words, typical broadcast type of job. Mm-hmm. Eventually, they decide we no longer need your services. So I had to find a job, and I followed the path that had been set before me by another person who was in broadcasting, mm-hmm. and had come down here to work at, I think it was Channel 5. And so I started looking for a job basically because she encouraged me to look for a broadcasting job here in this area. I got down here and I started working at Channel 10.
Okay.
Which at that time was still NBC. So it hadn't switched to Fox.
I remember.
yet.
Okay. I remember that.
And you talk about confusion. It caused quite a bit of confusion when Fox went to 10 and NBC went to 15. But anyway, I started there, but I wasn't on the air. I was sitting in an audio booth, turning on and off the microphones for the Dot Moore show.
I remember
and
that.
And for television news. So I had a feeling I wasn't ever going to get out of the booth. It was like I was restricted to that particular job. So what I did was I heard about a job that was open at a radio station.
Okay.
Actually, it was 2 radio stations owned by the same company. That happened to be, for one, WBLX. The other one was WMOO. Okay. Now, WBLX, as most people know, is an urban station, primarily a minority black audience. WMOO, on the other hand, was a Christian station. So you had to make sure that you had the right audience with the right news and didn't get them mixed up. So anyway, what I ended up doing was going there, and I always like to tell this story. There were several people who people might remember, Sonny Love and Carmen Brown. Carmen's still here in town. She does a internet radio broadcast that runs in the middle of the night that is jazz. So it's on an internet station. And I was called the token white boy on WBLX. Didn't bother me a bit, but it was something people got to know me about. I went to the Jacksons concert when it was here, and I identified myself as, "You're Ron Reams?" They thought the guy was a black guy, and I said, "No, as far as I can tell, I'm not." So, but anyway, that was one of the interesting experiences of my life, was working there. But then I moved on to other stations. I was at WKRG AM, which is now WNTM, and it's a news talk station. I worked there for a little while, and then I got an opportunity to go to WABB, which is no longer WABB. It's now owned by a different company. At that time, it was family-owned. Bernie Dittman and his family owned WABB, and they sold it to Cumulus Broadcasting, who changed the call letters to WABD.
Yeah, they were so smooth in how they did that. Just
they
one
thought,
little letter.
They thought that would be a great way to bring the audience with them.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the day, though, that WABB went off the air, and we had just people continuously were coming into the station, and I was one of them, to talk about memories. I told somebody the other day that if I had known that I was having so much fun when I was there, I would have tried to enjoy it better, but it looked too much like work at the time, because it was. I was the news guy along with David Page, who was, a lot of people will remember. But anyway, the thing was, I was there for a while. Then I went back to WKRG again. So I moved around a little here in town, and eventually I went back to television as a news producer. That's primarily the guy who writes news, except for what the reporters put in. He also times it, he or she times it to make sure that they finish on time and don't run over. And one of my main concerns or problems was trying to get the reporters to end their package in the proper time limit, because they'd come in and say, "I need an extra 10 seconds. I'm saying, "Well, you're not going to get it." I'm sorry. We're going to run over. Well, if it's more than 10 seconds for everybody who's doing a package that night, you got a problem. You're going to be over a minute or two.
And some advertisers not going to be happy.
No, because they don't want you to drop the advertising. So anyway, but that was my last job. I was a producer at Channel 5, WKRG. So I worked at Fox 10, which was then NBC. Then I was also at Channel 15, where I did news producing, but I was also the internet news producer. I put everything that came out of the newscast on the internet. That job played out when they said, "You know what? We can get the reporters to put their own stuff up on the internet." So they weren't happy. I wasn't happy because I lost my job. And it was one of those type things. So it's a trend in broadcasting, especially in Mobile, that if you can find a way to save money, and one of those ways is letting people go, then you do it. That's one of my pet peeves, though, because I feel like the public is not being served the way they used to be when people like me and Michael P. Sloan on KSJ and a bunch of other folks who were doing actual news reporting. We weren't just reading the news. We were going to school board meetings. We were going to city council meetings. Back when I first got here, it was a 3-member city commission. So that's a change that we were talking about.
Sure.
That was a major change when we went to a 7-person council and a mayor position. Previous, the 3 members of the city commission would rotate the position of mayor between the 3 during their 4-year term.
Wow.
Never heard of
Yeah,
such.
I've never heard of that.
And the same thing was going on with the county commission, and it still exists on the county commission here. We have 3 members, but they rotate the position of chairman between those 3 members for an even amount of time during the 4-year term. Gotcha. So that's something that's definitely changed in the city, not so much in the county.
Well, and also I was going to mention, you talk about how a lot of these corporations, these channels, their goal is to really trim the fat, and save as much money as possible. I did an interview about 4 or 5 months ago, and I got a call from a news reporter, and she said, "Hey, want to talk about growth and development in West Mobile? Can you meet me at this corner in like 20 minutes?" I was like, "Holy cow. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
20
I can do
minutes.
It. So I get in the car and I go there and I pull up, and all I see is a news car. It's just her. And I was like, wait a minute, we're missing something here. What? And she opens up the back. She gets out the tripod. She gets out. She does the white balance. She tests the microphone. And it was just her. I was like, oh my gosh.
What we call a one-man band.
I honestly, I could not believe it.
Yeah.
And then I thought, think about the requirements for that position that have changed so much from, 30 years ago or so. And so that really makes sense what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I blame the bean counters. That's what we all call them.
Yeah.
The bean counters for looking ways to trim the quote unquote fat, which I don't think was fat. I thought it was a service to the community. And, public service goes a long way in improving your image to the community. And when you're not providing the service you used to, a lot of people are saying, And so one of the things that kind of gets my television people a little miffed is I will say, it's not like it was in the old days when I went out and covered school board or city council or whatever. I said, nowadays the TV stations are allowed to go on the air and do a 2-minute commercial for their 6 and 10 o'clock news under the alleged precept of giving the news. They basically do a 2-minute report. You don't get in-depth coverage. And what bothers me about that particular issue is not only is that true of radio and television, but now, as we all know, it has happened in newspaper. You can't go out. Well, you don't have a newspaper delivered to your house every day, as was the case when I was first here.
Twice a day.
You
remember that?
You had the press and the register.
Yeah.
But then they combined the two, press register. Next thing you know, they're delivering 3 days a week and once on Sunday. But we were getting just the Sunday paper. So, if you wanted an in-depth news report, it wasn't like you used to be able to get it. And if you weren't internet savvy, if you weren't computer savvy, you were out of luck because you had to go online to get this stuff. So anyway, that's one of the things that bothers me the most about how much things have changed since the early 80s, late 70s. People are not well served, in my opinion. And a lot of people may not agree, but I think when we had newscasters on the radio who actually covered the stories, and when the newspapers were in circulation and a lot of people would read those for their information, then I felt like we had a well-informed public. I don't think we're as well-informed today, and that's what scares me is, people can do or vote a certain way because they don't have full information.
Well, and also that's caused, I guess, the entrepreneurs to kind of rise up and say, hey, how can we change this? Now, one thing I noticed that the Press Register had that massive building downtown, this corner of Broad Street and is it Water Street? Yeah, Broad
Well,
Street.
actually, when I was working there when I was recovering from a hip surgery, they took pity on me and gave me a sit-down job in the advertising department.
Mm-hmm.
I was in classified ads, and not only did I take classified ads, I also wrote the stories, or actually obituaries, for lack of a better term. So, and boy, they counted the words in the obituaries, because if somebody went over word count too much, what would happen is the funeral home would charge the family, and the family said, we don't want to pay that. So you had to make sure that you were trimming the fat on your stories.
Gotcha.
To get just the basic facts. But anyway, that was you were talking about newspapers, television, radio, media, all that. I've had a little experience in every one of them. I co-worked with a lot of newspaper reporters.
But that building was sold recently, right?
Well, the first building was getting back to my original point. Yeah. Sorry. I went off chasing the rabbit. But anyway, the original building was on Government Street, and it was an old car dealership that had been converted into the newspaper's headquarters. I don't know where they were before that, but that's the building I worked in, working classified ads. And it wasn't too long after that the operation was sold by a conglomerate company. It's kind of like Gannett owned or still owns USA Today.
Yeah.
Well, the Press Register was bought by a group, and they moved to that new building. They started that new building, and they were sending all of their copy, believe it or not, to New Orleans. The newspapers were printed in New Orleans from the Mobile area, and then they brought the newspapers back from New Orleans and distributed them here in the Mobile area.
So that was before they went to the building that was on Government Street?
Yeah, it was on Government Street, and then they went to the new building, and that one had a printing press in it.
Yeah, wow.
So, but the old one had a printing press too. It was like toward the end of the period. But anyway, they still have that printing press in that newer building, and now they not only do the Press Register, they also print the USA Today, and they also print the Times-Picayune. So we've turned to kind of
switch places.
Yeah, switch places, because the New Orleans paper's being printed here now instead of in our paper being printed in New Orleans.
That's wild.
I would have no idea.
Yeah, that was just another thing that happened in news. So
well, and I'm gonna take a break here because Avery just said something, and I totally forgot to introduce her.
Yeah, I was wondering when you were going to get around.
How could I do that? I mean, this is like such a vital role in this podcast.
Yes.
Totally. So I will say.
And besides that, I like to look over and talk to her.
Much more than me.
Well, I wasn't going to say that, but you got the point.
It is the truth. It is the truth. I am thankful because it would be totally boring just talking to me. But the co-host of the show is Avery Smith. And so Avery has lived in Mobile all her life as well, although it is not as long as I have lived because she's much younger.
I can't believe I actually came up with a fact or something that she didn't know already. So
I'm learning a lot. This is a lot.
Oh, trust me. When we talk at the office, I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't know that. And then I realize, oh yeah, I'm about 18 years older than you. I'm kind of the old man. But I'm thankful for her.
Not today, you aren't.
Well, hey, what do they say about age? That it's all something. You're only as old as you feel.
Or it's the road behind you, is what it is.
That's it.
You've traveled a while.
Only as old as you think you are. I guess that's what it is. But so Avery and I were talking, and we came up with some questions. And of course, anyone that's a guest on the podcast, we really want to dig in, and like you've done, I mean, you've shared so much of your history and how that relates to Mobile, and there have been a lot of aha moments. So we came up, with some questions, and of course, at the very end, we're going to do our favorite part, which is the rapid fire. And
oh boy!
And so
I'm really looking forward to that.
It's the easiest part.
I was going to tell you, I've already made it clear to them that if I hear a question that I'm really not comfortable with, I'm going to plead the fifth.
That's it. Hey, we'll be okay with that.
I hope so.
I love secrets, though.
That's it. That's it. One of the things we're going to do, we're going to talk about some things that are uniquely to Mobile, and then that's going to be on the rapid fire. And you can't give a description or an explanation. You just give the answer, the first thing that pops out of your mouth. And so
I will try.
There you go. But before we get to that part, I did want to kind of start down this path. You've touched on many of the things that you've done, which has really been mind blowing. I couldn't think of a better guest to kind of give us a big
picture. Can I add just one
Sure.
more thing? I have gotten to go places and see things and meet people that I never thought in my life when I was a kid I would get to do. And one of the primary things that I had so much enjoyment from was when the atomic submarine USS Alabama came to Mobile after it was commissioned. It came here first before it went down through the Panama Canal and up towards San Diego, where it is stationed. But they came here first to pay a visit to Mobile and pay tribute to our USS Alabama battleship. Well, they invited the media, and so several reporters and photographers, which are now synonymous to each other.
Yeah.
And by the way, there were 3 people out on most shoots: audio guy, the guy shooting the video, and the reporter. No longer. But I went out there with one of my media friends from television, and we climbed a rope ladder to get into the ship. Oh boy, that was a trip.
Cool. I can imagine.
Literally, I tripped going up the ladder. No, but anyway, the thing is, I got to ride on an atomic submarine.
Wow.
Coming into the Mobile Bay with the fog there, we had to wait for a while. We could not basically come in at the time we had scheduled. So the welcoming ceremony scheduled for 5 p.m. went to about 7 or 8. But anyway, that was a very interesting thing. And I've interviewed all kinds of folks that I don't know if you're familiar with the name Ed Hurley.
Doesn't ring a bell.
He was a voice on a lot of the old newsreels that you can still find on YouTube, historic video. But anyway, he was the spokesperson or the announcer for the Kraft Company at the time that I got to talk to him. And they had come to Mobile for the Junior Miss pageant, which they were longtime sponsors of Junior Miss. And to get to meet a broadcast icon like Ed Hurley was a real thrill. So that's just a couple of things I wanted to add because, like I said, there's been so much that has happened to me, and that I'm just amazed.
That's amazing. Well, you put yourself in a position where you have a lot of exposure that an average person who had, a job that wasn't so touched with media would get to experience. That reminds me, obviously I was in a band in my former career, and the amount of people that I got to connect with. I remember playing, a concert, holding up a guitar like I played guitar. Wait a minute, drum
There you go.
He's a drummer and he's
What am I
playing a
doing
guitar, air guitar.
That's it. But I remember playing a concert, looking out, and there's Pat Boone,
Wow.
or walking down a hallway, and there's Vince Gill. Got to talk to Vince Gill, and just that type of thing happened, and then you kind of step back and go, "Whoa, wait a minute! Like I wish I could have enjoyed it a little more." Kind of push pause.
Kind of like my radio career.
Just take it all in.
When I was at WABB, we were doing a lot of stuff, like going out to the Greater Gulf State Fair and doing the high striker. You remember the high striker?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You'd take the mallet
I
and
did
hit
that
it,
one time,
and you'd actually hit the bell. Hopefully, well, we did that almost every year, and I about froze to death out there several years. But it was fun. I
can imagine.
It was fun. But like I said, I had a lot of fun experience. But at the time, it felt too much like work.
Yeah.
So I wasn't enjoying it like I probably should have.
Well, hey, I'm glad we have some good memories to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this one question. It's
I bet she's got more than
Oh,
one.
I've got more than one. I've got a few. If somebody is listening to this podcast or watching the podcast, and you could tell someone, from all around the country, they've never been to Mobile, they don't know much about it, but if you could kind of sum up, like maybe a paragraph worth of things, you could sum up Mobile of what it's like, to describe it. And you may take more than one paragraph. For me, I know it'd take 3 or 4. But what would you kind of package as a summary of what Mobile and living in Mobile is like?
Well, we have our areas of blight and construction that are going on, but for the most part, I would say Mobile is a beautiful city. If you have never driven down Government Boulevard and seen the oaks that overhang, or Dolphin Street, see the oaks that overhang, well, or Spring Hill Avenue. I got a bunch
there's a lot of streets, isn't that something?
that have these oaks that are hundreds of years old, and they cover the streets. They just go over the street. And then you have these antebellum mansions that were built 150 years ago or more, and they're still standing. A lot of Mobile's heritage has been destroyed in the name of progress. So some of the buildings that we see in pictures now only, you don't see them on the street because they've been destroyed. So, you got to see it while you can. And in Mobile, we are blessed because there are a lot of old homes that every year they have a tour of homes, and some of these old homes open their doors and let people come in and take a tour. Then we have some of the museum homes. They are homes that were used back years ago that have now been turned into museum pieces. And Oakley is an example of that. And so, the thing is just enjoying the beauty of the town. There are areas, like I said, like any town, where things aren't developed or they are allowed to basically disintegrate, or people are still living in conditions that just should not be. But that's just part of the area, and unfortunately part of the culture.
Do you ever find yourself driving across the Bayway or the Causeway, and just not even really considering how unbelievable it is?
Yeah.
I do that all the time.
I try to keep my eyes on the road. However, if I have my wife along with me, she'll describe, "Did you see that?" And I'm going, "No, I'm sorry." But it is a beautiful area. The waters are, for the most part, pristine.
Sparkling.
And, in certain areas on the Causeway and the Bayway, it's rather shallow. You can't throw a line out and go down 6 feet. It's going to be more like 3 or 4 feet, Wow. And if the tide goes out, then you can see grass.
Yeah.
Where you were seeing water earlier.
Times.
But that's part of it too. Ben Raines, who was a newspaper reporter, but he's the guy who discovered the Clotilda, has done a lot of stories about the outdoors in Mobile. And there are people who enjoy the outdoors for recreation. There are a lot of hunters that enjoy our wooded areas, but fishermen are just, all you have to do is go to the Alabama Deep Sea Fishing Rodeo, which I have covered for years. As a matter of fact, I have a video I shot in 1987 that I put on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, and we'll go ahead and take a break, or not a break, but a pause. So share the name of your YouTube channel or where somebody can find it.
Basically, if you put in Ron Reams, and it's all like one word on a search, it should bring it up.
Gotcha.
But I've got a lot of video on there, but that's one of my prize videos because it's a historic type of thing. I've got Randy Patrick when he had hair.
Wow. Hey, imagine that.
And several other people that, are on there. But
Mel Showers is on there, isn't he?
I think so.
I think I looked at that video yesterday. I'm like, look how young he looks.
It's so wild. Yeah, we were looking at the video, and it's just like it took me back.
Yeah, and Mel's one of my oldest friends here in Mobile. He was such a great guy, and I'm sorry he's no longer on the air, but I understand he's living in Texas. He comes back here every once in a while, but he has children who live in Texas, so he's moved out there with them. That's one of the great things about having kids, that, they grew up with you and spent their money, your money, and now you can turn the tables.
That's right.
Go to their house.
That's what I hear.
And stay there.
Yeah. What's for dinner?
It's funny when you mention Mel Showers. and Avery showed me the video, and it just took me back so much. I think that's one of the things about Mobile that makes it unique and special. And I don't know if this is the same way in every town that's the size of Mobile, but truly, people like Mel Showers, Bob Grip, Nancy Pierce, I mean, literally like celebrities. I mean, like full-blown at the grocery store. Oh my gosh, it's Bob Grip. I mean,
That's how I feel about Uncle Henry.
Yeah, that's the great thing about being in media, because these are friends of mine you're talking about. Uncle Henry and I go a long way back.
I just got him to autograph my purse.
Autograph your purse?
Yeah, so I can carry it around everywhere I go.
Did he ask you for money out of that purse?
I'm not surprised.
But anyway, that's one of the things that, Henry and I have known each other a very, very long time. And as a matter of fact, I gifted him a book the other day just to say thanks for your friendship over the years. So I found a book that butter my buns and call me a biscuit or something like that. It was like colloquial sayings that you hear out in the country. So I thought of him when I saw that book. And because, he has matured quite a bit for a mature guy over the 30 years I've known him. So.
Well, it's funny because people take advantage of that name recognition, and he's a featured person on billboards, commercials.
Doing a lot of commercials.
Yep.
Yeah, it's wild. It really is.
Yeah, I wish that happened to me. But I've had people use my voice on commercials, but there was mostly during political seasons when I was, candidates who say, I want a news authority type voice. So they'd put me on there.
Well, I will say that I hope I don't get a lot of comments about this, but your comments are welcome. I'm going to go ahead and look at the camera here and say your comments are welcome. But there was a point a few years back when I wanted to be a voiceover artist. And I thought, this could be a career that I could pursue. And so I bought the nice microphone. I built a voiceover studio in my house. I had the computer software, all of that. And I'm telling you, that job is a grind. I mean, if you do that as a professional,
it is.
It is wild. Well,
I tried the same thing.
Yeah.
Just wasn't worth it to me.
It is it's a very niche market, but the people who do it and do it well, I mean, of course, they can do really well with it. But man, I mean, I did one job. It was a paying job. I'm sad to say. It only paid $100, so it didn't even touch the amount of investment I had made on. Really? Yeah, it didn't.
I understand.
And I mean, I was reading a book for an Asian organization. I don't remember. It was a school, and so it was like a school handbook, and I had to provide the audio version of it. So I'm reading this, and you could tell some things had been lost in translation, but it was talking about the proper way to dress, the proper way to act, and do this. And I'm reading this. It was just crazy, the amount of editing involved. And I did that for a few days, and I thought, okay, this career is not for me. So that's it. But
I have great respect for Andy Andrews.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because Andy is a New York Times bestseller. He does some great work writing, but he also narrates his own books on audiobook.
And that's rare, by the way, for an author to do that.
A lot of writers will say, first of all, I don't have time. Second of all, my voice is not that great for doing audiobooks. And, they put it off, but he does his own audiobooks. And I've gotten to know him over the years because of my radio background. And I've gone over to see him at his studio. He's got a great studio.
At the Wharf, right?
Yep, at the Wharf. That he has the Safe Harbor Studios. And so he's on, on a regular basis. Matter of fact, he has a couple of shows each week called the Blue Plate Special that he does on Tuesdays and Thursdays at lunchtime. It's about 12:15. And I've gotten to know him and some of the people who work for him. And I just enjoy knowing him, even though we don't get to see each other hardly at all. But I consider him a friend.
And what's interesting about Andy, and there was, I guess when I first got started with media and public speaking, I've always viewed Andy as my mentor. Yeah. Because what he does on stage is at the highest level, and I've always, really aspired to that. But what's interesting is we bring that back around to Mobile is right here. I mean, Andy grew up in this area, and he is a multiple New York Times bestselling author. He's spoken at the request of, I think, 3 or 4 presidents. He does corporate speaking, training, all this, all
The military too.
And he's right here in this area.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing about people may not know this, but there's several famous people who are from Mobile. And, you know, of course, Jimmy Buffett and, you know, some other people in the sports realm. But it really is. It's this town that most people have heard of, maybe in the distance. They're around the country, but they usually mispronounce it.
Yeah.
And that has been a problem.
On my way over here, my GPS from Waz kept calling it Mobile. And Grelot Road was not Grelot Road. It was Grillo.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Grillo. Sounded like Brillo.
Yep.
But anyway, so we haven't quite indoctrinated the entire country how to pronounce it, but at least we know what they're talking about.
And you can always tell if they're from out of town because they're going to say mobile. They're going to say mobile. Man, that's like the worst. You know?
Really?
But yeah, we're working there. You know, we're getting folks into that. I made a video a couple months back about the mispronunciations in the city and, you know, Crichton, not Crichton, as I've heard many people say. But
Try to introduce them to Conica sausage.
Oh, yeah. Or as my daughter many years ago said, connect the sausage. And so I thought that was funny. But, and by the way, Connect a Sausage, certainly not being a sponsor of the podcast, but they should be because we eat enough of it.
We paid the power bill last
That's
month.
right, pretty much.
It's delicious.
Pretty much. And that's the funny thing. There are several things that are uniquely to Mobile. And of course, this podcast is celebrating that, and we want to continue to do that. We need to have some Conecuh sausage on the podcast one day. We'll have to consider doing
You're
that.
going to have to invite me back that day.
That's it.
Gladly.
We will do that. We will do that. We'll invite many. But as far as like the voiceover thing, I did want to say that, man, every now and then I can slip into that announcer mode, and I'm like, oh my gosh, do not do that. Like I cannot do it. I'm just gonna
I
be
tried
myself.
my best not to, even when I was on the air. I wanted to use my natural voice.
Yeah.
I credit my mother and my daddy for my singing voice when I could sing. I have asthma now, so I don't do a lot of singing. I had to drop out of the choir at Spring Hill Baptist because of
Okay.
I didn't want to cough in the middle of a musical number or whatever. But my mother pretty much, even though my dad was a part-time minister of music in the Atlanta area, my mother kind of taught me to sing, and she taught me to memorize Bible verses when I was a kid. I could remember the Bible verses just like yesterday. But I think I developed my speaking voice because of my singing. And I never wanted to put on airs and sound like, you know, David Page or something like that. But because he did it, he would definitely go into a announcer type mode when he's doing the news on WABB.
That's awesome.
You know, but anyway, I never did that. I just presented it with my regular voice. It's kind of like, you know, people would say, well, what did you change your name from? Because we know Randy Patrick is not Randy Patrick. You know, what's his real name? So, well,
She's shocked.
I said that's part of
No idea.
That's part of his real name, but it's not his whole real name. I'm not going to say what it is.
Yeah, sure.
But I'd say my name when I was born was Ronald David Reams. The David was my grandfather. But the letters in my name match my father's middle name, which he went by. His name was Roland, R-O-L-A-N-D. My name Ronald, R-O-N-A-L-D. Those same letters are in my name that I did not realize until I got to be an adult. It just went right over my head that those same letters were in my name. So anyway, but I never changed it. I just, when I was growing up, I was Ronnie. So anybody who calls me Ronnie, I'm thinking these folks know me from Atlanta.
That's funny.
That's easy to tell because they still call me Ronnie in my home area. But when I got into radio, it was shortened to the Ron. So it was Ron Reams, and it's been that way ever since.
Just be yourself.
Yeah.
That's it. Well, Ron, I wanted to ask you, for people talking about Mobile and maybe folks that are considering moving here or just want to know about Mobile in general, what would you say that Mobile does really well? And that can be, you know, whether it's from the mayor, whether it's from the overall communities, but what do you think Mobile does well? and then we're going to ask you the other question after that.
I think I've already talked about the other question about not having enough news coverage like I would like we used to have. But as far as what they do well, I think it's a very welcoming community. I think that you can find your place here, whether that be at your local church or involved in civic organizations, which we have plenty of, who do good work in the community. There's lots to do. People keep telling me, I have nothing to do. Well, you're not looking hard enough, because there's something going on in this town that you can get involved with, whether it be the Alabama Deep Sea Fishing Rodeo, the Greater Gulf State Fair, the chili cook-off for cancer, Cancer Society that happens every year. There's all kinds of things that go on. They just roll around on a different time of the calendar. But it's not that you can't find something to do. Apparently, some people are just too lazy to look for it.
Well, and I hear that from time to time in the YouTube comments. People will say, or a video I made about the pros and cons. I talked about, maybe the cons or, this, that, and the other. But I think that we're so spoiled. When we think of something to do, we think of all of the, the most popular choices. Okay, go to an NFL game, go to a professional sports game, go to, some type of, retail sport, or not sports, but like Dave and Buster's, or go to this or go to that. Those are super easy choices. Mm-hmm. But the things that you're talking about, sometimes they may take some creativity, but I think the enjoyment might be a lot deeper and a lot less shallow. Whereas if you connect with an organization or connect with a group, those things are going to have a lasting impact. They can develop relationships and give you those roots. Mardi Gras organizations and those type of things are huge in Mobile. Mm-hmm. But also, there are just a lot of other ways. You may have to dig a little bit, but I agree with you. I think there are
if you
a
look,
lot.
You'll
Exactly.
find it.
Exactly.
The Bible says that,
That's it.
Knock and the door shall be open. Seek and ye shall find. A lot of folks don't take their Bible seriously, apparently. But the thing is, I'm shocked. I'm going to use a line from Casablanca.
Okay.
I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you. That the number of folks that I have run into here in this town who have never been to the USS Alabama. Mm. They've never taken the tour. They don't have no idea what an asset that is, even though it's one of the number one tourist attractions in the entire state of Alabama. Mm. The other thing that a lot of folks haven't gone to, but they started when the lights at Christmas started, is Bellingrath Gardens. It's just a beautiful area. But
it's her favorite thing.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
But to go not at Christmas.
I'm glad
I want to go like when the flowers are blooming.
Yeah.
So
that's the best time.
That's the best time. I went about 2 weeks ago.
And the good thing about that was when I was working and covering Junior Miss, they would take all those contestants out there for one day. They would have a tour of, for the Junior Miss contestants. Mm. And then later that night, they would get in the cars, go down to Dauphin Island, go to the Isle Dauphine Country Club and have a cookout. Mm. So, we were showing off the things to do in Mobile. Wenzel's Oyster House was another place I went. Yeah. Some of these girls had never put an oyster in their mouth in their entire life.
That's me.
They have a raw oyster contest with the girls.
Yes. Yep, they do.
I'm pretty sure.
An eating contest. See how many you can get down.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the kind of things that are available. But how many people do you know who never darken the door of these places?
And the museum, I will tell you, I was one of the people who'd never been to the museum in Mobile. And then a few years ago, I was looking for something to do with my family. And I said, I'm just going to go. Oh, my word. Mm-hmm. I thought, what a treasure.
You're talking about the one University or the Mardi Gras?
The one on
Royal Street.
Yes, the big white one.
Let me give you a little secret. I'm going to go down there and volunteer.
Okay.
We have the Mobile Visitor Center in that same building. Mm-hmm. And I've been talking to the guy that I've known for years who used to work at Fort Condy, but he is basically in charge of getting the volunteers. And I went there and saw him this week because I hate being retired and not doing anything. So the main thing I miss about working is the paycheck. Which you don't get as a volunteer, but still you're doing something.
Sure.
So I have told him I'll come out, a couple of times a month or whatever. There's a lot of people who volunteer in areas like that they can go down and they can tell people what's there to do in Mobile. And he said, "You'd be a natural, Ron." He says, "You know everything that has gone on and everything that will go on or is coming up." And I said, "Well, if you feel like I'd be of service, I'll be happy to." Yeah. So,
well, what would you say? You mentioned that the thing that Mobile's lacking in is more coverage that needs to have more depth to that. But what would you say, aside from that, are some other things that Mobile could work on? And before you answer, I will say that one thing is public transportation, but that is a whole can of worms with the way
I have no expertise in whatsoever.
I don't either. But what else would you say are some things that Mobile could work on?
Community relations, I guess, is the good word for it. I think too many of us are isolated in our own little world.
Okay.
We don't reach out to others in the community who have a different point of view or have a completely different background than we do. And that's the kind of thing that causes prejudice. When you don't listen to the other guy and you don't try to understand what their point of view is. And I think that we're making progress, but looking at some of the things I see going on, I can tell we got a long way to go.
Well, and I've gotten some complaints with some of the videos that I make. I mean, I live in West Mobile, so I've made videos that have focused on this area, and I've ventured more in the Midtown and doing some downtown things. But I've had some people, comment, "Hey, you need to show the entirety of Mobile." And I think
if
that
you have the time, you ought to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing is, you don't always have that time.
Yeah. Well, it is difficult, to carve out that time. Obviously, staying, pretty busy with real estate.
I would hope so.
Yeah, it's been an incredible ride, especially the last few years with the way the market's happened, and we've seen. I will say the market is good in Mobile, and it continues to be good, even though with the changes with interest rates and so forth. But finding that time to carve out and focus on different communities. So that's at the top of my list for 2023 is to really try and be more encompassing. But I think that there's a new documentary that just came out on Netflix. Have you heard about it?
I was going to bring that up.
I'm glad
because I went to the showing on Saturday night. It's called Descendant, and it's about the descendants of the people who were brought over on a ship from Africa, and of course they were slaves, and they were here for 5 years as slaves, because when they were brought here, it was just before the Civil War, and then at the end of the Civil War, Lincoln had the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves. Well, the slaves were poor. They could not just, hey, let's go get a cruise ship and go back to Benin or wherever they came from in Africa. So basically they settled in the plateau area of Mobile, which is just north. It's off of Telegraph Road going up north of Mobile proper, near Pritchard. And they built their community there. And so the thing is that a lot of folks aren't aware of that history. This film is excellent.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, a friend of mine made it.
Wow.
Since, one of the things that has come from my career in media is I got to know her, Margaret Brown, because of her daddy, Milton Brown.
Oh, I know the name.
And Milton Brown was in real estate. But he also had a thing called Bama Boy Productions, and he wrote these. He and along with another guy wrote the music for Every Which Way But Loose,
Clint Eastwood,
which was a Clint Eastwood movie.
We're talking way above this young lady's head. She doesn't have a clue.
She needs to see that movie. The monkey is outrageously funny. Yeah. There's a monkey, an orangutan in it.
Okay.
Who is a great actor.
Avery, that was before your time.
Yeah.
Well, there was a great monkey on the episode of Gilligan's Island that I watched last night.
But, people her age need to see some of these old movies.
Absolutely.
Because they're well done. But anyway, I knew Milton, who also was well known before the fact that he took Jimmy Buffett to Nashville.
Wow.
He knew Jimmy here because Jimmy would sing at the corner where the Admiral Sims, used to be Admiral Sims Hotel. Wow. He sang in that bar at the Admiral Sims, and Milton heard him and developed a relationship with him and took him to Nashville, and the rest is history.
Wow.
So, that
neat.
type of thing. So a lot of people don't know about that either. But I'm just saying that, there's so many opportunities to reach out to other people in this community and find out where they come from. One of the things that brought that about in my life is that working at WBLX. I saw a lot of things, and I read a lot of things, and I met a lot of people who pretty much opened my mind to seeing things from their point of view. And I think too many of us shut ourselves off.
Oh, I agree completely.
From doing that.
Well, and a lot of the questions I get are from people around the country who are of, a different ethnicity, and they're asking questions like, hey, am I going to be welcomed in Mobile? What's it like? And so Mobile is a very, very diverse city, and there are a lot of folks that are represented in Mobile, and obviously it's difficult for me to speak on what it's going to be like for someone of a different ethnicity. Mm-hmm. But what I can do is I can talk with folks at my office, that come from a different background, and they're able to speak to that. They're able to share experiences. But Mobile,
I like the fact that we celebrate our differences, our ethnicity, as you said.
Yeah, I had to think about it. I was like, how do I pronounce that exactly?
But the Greek festival, which we just had recently, that's a primary way that the Greek church down on Ann Street reaches out to our community and exposes them to what the Greek background is all about, what their ethnicity is all about. And there's several others. The Friendly Sons of St. Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a member of that organization, although my background as being part Irish is questionable. But the thing is, there are several groups that are organized. The same time that the Descendant movie was being shown, the night before, the Latin community had a get together.
That's right.
Down in downtown.
the Loda Art Walk.
Right.
That was, yep.
And so, so these groups reach out to these communities, to us. And if we don't take advantage of finding out who they are and what they're about and being non-judgmental, that's the one thing that bothers me the most. Too many people are judgmental without having all the facts, not knowing what they're talking about. And I'd love to tell them, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. But that's not a good way to build friends and, have a good relationship with all these people. So.
Well, one person that I definitely want to have on the podcast is Jim Mather. Do you know Jim?
I know Jim Mather.
So he is in charge or in leadership of an organization connected with University of South Alabama. He actually lives across the street. And this is a crazy story that I like to tell. But Jim and Mary have this ministry, an organization called Friends of Internationals. Mm-hmm. And once a week, I believe, I'm kind of touching on this.
Could be more.
Could be more. They have a large group meeting at their house, and they live in University Park, right across the street from South Alabama. And, the average house in University Park is going to range from maybe 1,500 square feet to maybe, 2,500.
Relatively small.
Yeah. And Jim and Mary built on a massive addition on the back of their house, enough to house, you can have 100 people in their house. Exactly. It's crazy. And they have dedicated their lives to welcoming students who come to the University of South Alabama from all over the world. And it is incredible. Mm-hmm. And so, obviously he would have some incredible stories to tell about perception and community and being welcomed.
He'd be a good guest.
He really would. But what's interesting, obviously, Mobile has the International Festival. Yep. And that's a big deal in the city of Mobile. A lot of the local schools, they send their kids down there on
Friday
field trips. Absolutely.
They have them on Friday, then the general public on Saturday. And that's a good opportunity to learn about other folks who live in your community.
Well, and it really is. So we need to have Jim Mather. Let's make a note, Jim Mather on the podcast. But Ron, before we wrap up, obviously we're going to get to the lightning round. But before we get there,
I'm dreading that one.
You're going to get a little nervous. Can you talk a little bit about your the things that you've learned, you are connected or have been connected with the Salvation Army role that you had there. Can you talk a little bit about that and the presence in Mobile?
That's probably what I call the most enjoyable, important job I ever had, was working in community and public relations for the Salvation Army, because at the time I felt like a lot of folks did not know who they are, what they are, and why they do what they do. I think they've been unfairly criticized in cases where all they're trying to do is serve their Lord, and serve the Lord in a meaningful way that reaches out to the folks who are in need. And it's not because it's just part of what you do, it's because they're serving God. And my boss at the Salvation Army, Major Glenn Fight, who did a lot to help me and guide me in ways to publicize the Salvation Army, he did so much in reaching out to the community, and it pains me to see some of the subsequent people who came in who just kind of dropped it. They dropped the ball as far as I'm concerned, because we were getting a lot of great coverage from my fellow news people. And I got to admit that part of the reason we got a lot of coverage is because I was one of them.
Sure.
And they knew me, so they would cover. But the thing is, there's so much that they do because of their love for God and Jesus, and that a lot of folks just thought they were just another charity, which I don't think they are. And I think there's so much more. And that's one of the reasons, being a Southern Baptist as I am, I was grateful to work with them and for them. Major Fight used to call the Southern Baptists the Salvation Navy. He said, you guys would put them in the water. Basically, you convert somebody, put them in the water. And so we were the Navy. I tried to remind him that there was a Christian comedian named Grady Nutt who said he tried to set people straight like the Methodist and tell them that baptize means put them under till they bubble. And so, but he couldn't quite see it my way. So anyway, but yeah, I was grateful for that time. I got to do things again and see things that I would not have been able to see or do. I was at Ground Zero after 9/11, 6 months after the planes hit. And we had memorial services up there. I was there because I was volunteering. I took time off from my job here to go to New York and to help with what they were doing. They were feeding a lot of people, and they were helping basically to minister to the first responders. So I went on that. I had no idea when I went there that they were going to station me at the landfill where they were bringing all the debris. Yeah. But it was still meaningful to me to be able to be there.
Well, and one of the things tying in with the Salvation Army and their primary location, they have one downtown. Or how does that? Can you give us a little insight into that?
We're on Dauphin Street.
Okay.
I'm talking like I'm still there. On Dauphin Street, it was a wonderful building that was basically built and donated by the Ralph Chandler Foundation. Ralph Chandler was the publisher at one time of the Press Register. And so the Press Register put a lot of effort into getting that building done, donated. But the thing is that, you know, so many people drive right by it. And they don't see the sign. Yeah. They don't look at the building. But that's where the ministry centers from. Right now, I believe they're still there. We call the mobile feeding units that go down to help out. Locally, they go when there's a fire or something going on, like trying to rescue somebody who's out in the water somewhere. Yeah. And they've sent a couple of units down to Florida in the aftermath of the hurricane there that was so devastating. So that's one of the things that happened. And when we have a hurricane here, I was here in 79, but also we had a hurricane here when I was there working. And they send units from all over the Southeast to Mobile, and they take one of the officers who came in, who has experience, to basically take it off of our hands locally and to supervise and to send out the units and all that kind. And they've got experience at it, so they know what they're doing.
Well, and the thing about Mobile, one of the big topics that people talk about are hurricanes, and that's a big deal. Obviously, these national organizations come in, and a lot of folks will ask me. They'll say, "Well, oh my gosh, are you scared about the hurricanes? If I buy this house, is it going to be blown over?" And I'm like, just relax, a little bit. I'm not saying that hurricanes are not a big deal, but in Mobile, I think one of the greatest things people could say about the people of Mobile is they are resilient.
Yep.
And
pull together in times of trouble.
That's
exactly. Right. And so
my daddy used to tell me, he said, when you moved to Mobile, I just couldn't tell my wife, your mother, that you were moving to a hurricane prone area. I'd say, well, I'm glad you didn't, because she'd worry about it the whole time the summer and the hurricane season was in vogue. Around here. So.
We just take it in stride.
That's right.
Whew, we missed another one, That's what we do every year.
Or it missed us.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, Ron, before we wrap up, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you.
Sure.
For being the very first guest on the Living in Mobile podcast.
I'm honored that that's the case.
Yeah. And I'd also like to thank Yellowhammer Coffee. I've got my cup here for being a sponsor of the podcast. Jeff Roberts is a good friend of mine, and what he is doing is truly an incredible thing for the people of Mobile, for the coffee industry. And so every time we have a podcast, I've got my cup here because
that's cool.
They're a great...
Did I talk long enough to be able to skip the lightning round?
No, man. That's what we're going right now. So Avery has the questions there,
do.
and she's just going to ask you those, and we're gonna see what you think.
Either this or that. All right, Foosackly's or Zaxby's?
Zaxby's.
Dreamland or Meat Boss?
Meat Boss.
Old Dutch or Marble Slab?
Old Dutch. I like Cammy.
There you go.
Cravers or the original Oyster House?
Haven't been to Cravers yet.
The fried green tomatoes are excellent.
Well, I like the original Oyster House. We've been out there a lot.
The Bayway or the Causeway?
If I have a choice, I'll take the Bayway unless the traffic's backed up when you're going into the tunnel, and then I'll get off at the exit before and take the bankhead and get on the Causeway.
I know. Airport or Cottage Hill?
I prefer airport except during Christmas season.
Yep.
Midtown or West Mobile?
West Mobile.
Fox 10, WKRG, or WPMI
I don't think
News?
you can answer that.
I love each of them equally.
That
What
is
a
a
great
great answer.
Yellowhammer or Starbucks?
Yellowhammer.
Briquettes or Longhorn?
Well, I was going to say about Yellowhammer, I support our local
That's right.
businesses.
That's it.
So Starbucks has got enough money. Briquettes or what?
Or Longhorn Steakhouse?
I'm going to say briquettes.
And Dauphin Island or Gulf Shores?
Oh, Dauphin Island.
Absolutely.
We have a house on Dauphin Island. Really? Actually, it was my father-in-law's house.
Okay.
Who he left to my wife. So I have no interest in it whatsoever other than going there as much as I possibly can.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, I love Dauphin Island. We're on the east end, back in the woods.
Okay.
So when the hurricanes come along, we don't worry about it quite as much as that guy who's sitting out on the beach.
There are some homes that no longer have like sand. I mean, obviously they still have sand underneath, but they actually have water underneath the pilings.
There are homes that no longer have houses that used to be on the beach.
For sure. That is wild. That is wild. Well, Ron, hey, thank you so much for joining us.
Enjoyed it, Jeff.
And if
and
you
it
guys,
was nice to meet you.
Yes.
if you guys are watching, however you're watching this show, be sure and subscribe because we'll be dropping a new podcast. If you're listening, of course, subscribe to that as well and leave a comment because we love hearing your comments and ways that we can bring on new guests. We're excited about the future of the podcast because that's the entire point of this podcast, that is shining a light on the city of Mobile where I've lived my whole life. I absolutely love it. And that's what we want to do is shine
And if
a
you're
light.
listening, then you need to go to YouTube and look this up and watch it.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. So join us there on all platforms. And until the next episode, which will be dropping very soon, we thank you very much.